Hi guys, Sam here. I am the owner and artist of the Copper Elm, and today I'm talking about brushes. This is a topic that is super overwhelming to a lot of furniture artists out there, and it really doesn't have to be. But there's a million different brands on the market. There's a million different materials that a brush can be made out of. There's different sizes, different shapes, different textures. Which one for which project? Which one do I pick up? How do I use it? And how do I care for it afterward? It's a big deal. Doesn't need to be. So I'm going to walk you through all my tips and tricks, my preferences, which ones I use on which projects and why, and how I treat my brushes afterward. So stay tuned and we'll make this super simple for you. All right, guys, this is a topic I get asked about a million times. Full disclosure, I am a Klingon rep, so I sell Klingon brushes. I actually joined the club because I bought one, I fell in love with it, I never looked back. Full disclosure, they're just awesome, so I sell them. But they're not all I use. I actually have about 30 million brushes in my arsenal, and I use all of them. I go back and forth between a million different brushes, and they each have their purpose. They each have their place, and I want to walk you through why I use each one and when, and then which ones are my faves. So, starting from the absolute cheapest brush I own, your good old chip brush. These you can get for 50 cents, sometimes $1 if you're gonna splurge on the larger ones. You can get these at all your hardware stores, you can get them at Walmart, you can get them at my shop. I have chip brushes in my stores, just in case you needed something to grab while you're there. I use these for things that I don't expect to, be nice to my brushes. So, when I'm doing glaze, if I am glazing something with lots and lots of crevices in it that I know I'm gonna have to jam my brush into, I don't wanna use my fancy $37 brush. I wanna use something that I can toss out afterward, or that if it gets beat up, I'm not gonna cry over it. So that's when I grab my cheap chip brush. These are great for glaze. They get in all the nooks and crannies. They do shed like crazy, so you have to be careful. I would not use this for painting. I would definitely not use this for varnish. It's going to drive you nuts. But for glaze, it's amazing. It's also really good if you're using a texture additive like salt wash, because you don't really care about it. If it gets gunked up, who cares? Some people love these for primer. If you are using an oil-based primer that is like awful to wash out of your brushes, grab something cheap that you can toss out. I am super eco-friendly. I recycle everything. I try not to throw away anything, but these every once in a while, I have to throw in the trash, and they're 50 cents, so I'm not really gonna cry about it. On the topic of abused brushes, especially with texture additives, salt wash, I use a lot. I have this really hideous brush. It's so bad. It's embarrassing. It's got a plastic handle that is now covered in copper paint. It was probably $1 at Walmart, and it has seen better days. These little bristles, if you guys can see that, I mean, it's nasty. But I don't care because I only use it to stipple salt wash. This is my salt wash brush. It just goes in, I get a ton of texture with it. I'm not worried about it whatsoever. One day I will have to throw it away. I won't cry. I'll just run to Walmart and get another one. So, cheap little brushes, they do serve their purpose. I know you'll have a lot of people, especially people that, sell really high-end brushes, that are gonna say you have to use the high-end brushes on everything. I would hate for you to use this on something that you're abusing. I would hate for you to bend all your bristles when you don't need to. If you're doing something with oil, if you're doing something that's gonna be super damaging to your brush, use a cheap brush. That way you're not damaging your nice ones. All right, so that's on the low end of the spectrum. Another thing that's in my little paintbrush arsenal, little itty bitty brushes. So these are artist brushes. Some of them, this one is actually a makeup brush. This is a makeup brush. This is, like something that my son would use in kindergarten. Like, these are not high-end, crazy expensive, but they don't really shed. They're pretty good in there, and I use these for a lot of things. So if I'm doing varnish and I've got crevices on the side of a dresser or something like that where my varnish is starting to drip, or if I'm using enamel and it's starting to drip and I need to catch those drips, but I'm afraid to drag my big brush back across it because it will give drag marks, it'll mess up my finish, I use one of these and I just get in the tiny little crevices, I just pick up the excess. Or if I skipped one tiny little dot of varnish, I can just add this in there. I can put it in my piece, and it's perfect. So these hold a really big place in my heart. I use these on a daily basis. So grab yourself, you can go to Walmart and grab yourself a set of like 50 little kid brushes, essentially. I don't think they advertise them as kid brushes. They're in the arts and crafts section, but I mean, come on, these are children's brushes. They're awesome. Go grab yourself some makeup brushes. These are amazing. I use them for all kinds of things. So these are definitely a huge part of my painting career. Next, this big fancy one. I got this one on Amazon. I'll drop the link down below. It's definitely my most fun brush because it just feels good. I do this far too much before I use it. I just tend to stand here and go like this because it feels good. But this brush is awesome for feathering on like a dry brushing technique of color. If you just want a tiny bit of turquoise on top of your white furniture or something like that, where you're just needing a tiny bit, you need to be super delicate. Or what I use this on a lot, if you're using metal leafing, you've got your gold leaf pressed down, you've got it, your size on there, your varnish on there, you've got it glued on. This is going to be great to dust off all the excess. So you'll have little bits of gold leaf sticking up that you need to get off, but you need to be super delicate with them. Take this and just lightly dust over it. It's going to get those all off. Also, speaking of dust, every once in a while, if I'm working in my garage, I'm working on something and I'm about to varnish it and I got it all cleaned off, but there's just little specks of dust in some of the nooks and crannies. This is my go-to brush for cleaning, which is not what it's meant to be for, but I love it. So this one, I've got probably 10 of these in different sizes, little fan brushes. They're just really nice and they get into areas that other ones don't. Now, this one. This is also from Amazon. I'll have the link on there as well. This one is just a flat. This one is 1.5 inches. This is awesome for decoupage. This is also awesome for laying down your size of your varnish for metal leafing. So if you're adding things to your pieces, I also use this for varnish sometimes, especially if I'm doing something like a mannequin. This gets in all the crevices. It kind of glides over round areas pretty well, and it doesn't hold too much varnish. So if you're doing something where you don't want to cake on the varnish, you need to have more control, this is a really good option. You can see it's not super thick. It's just it holds a lot. You do have to wash them really well because the varnish kind of gets stuck on there. So keep an eye on that. This is kind of silly, but rollers. I love foam rollers. This is a 4-inch foam roller. I have a small roller that I pop this on the handle. I will use this for enamel. I will use this for primer. It's great for that. If you're doing anything with latex wall paint type stuff, grab one of these. And I also use this for stenciling a lot. So I do a lot of signs. I do signs with vinyl adhesive stencils that I create myself. I use this instead of, a lot of people use makeup sponges, and I used to. And then I realized I can use this, I can reuse it over and over again, and I basically dab it in my paint, I dab it onto my towel, my paper towel, whatever I'm offsetting it on, and then I can just dab it onto my stencil. It doesn't pull up the stencil, it's super delicate and soft, it's not gonna hurt anything, and it transfers quite a good amount of paint on there. So that's kind of another little secret, and these are super cheap. You can get a pack of like 6 of them for under 10 bucks, and you can reuse them forever. This is another little brush that I'm obsessed with. This one is from C Paints. Jess C sent this one to me, and first of all, it's one that I touch on a regular basis. I just want to pet it. They are very reminiscent of makeup brushes, and this is how a lot of her brushes are. They're based off of traditional makeup brushes. This would be like a contouring brush. It's awesome for top coats. I love it. It's also really good for doing cool beachy looks if you want to make like a weathered wood type look. This is really good. It surprisingly holds a ton of paint for such a little brush. And it washes out super easy. It does stain, so you can see the black on there. That's never gonna come off, but it's still super soft. So I don't mind how my brushes look as long as they're functional. And this one is still super functional, and it's got a cute little mermaid handle. It surprisingly fits well in your hand. So I really love this one. You can hit up Jess. I'll actually put a link on to her website as well. So if you guys want to grab one of these brushes, they're super cute. I do think she changes the style of them. Like the handles, they might not be selling this one anymore. She does have a lot of long ones that have metallics. They all have mermaid tails. They're super cute. So I'll put a link down there too if you guys want to hit up Jess and grab a cool brush. And all right, now we are moving on. This one, actually, we're going to skip this one for a second. I want to show you this one. So one more economical, easy to find brush is a Wooster Stubby. So this one, you get it at Lowe's or Home Depot. It's about $6 to $7. It's got a rubber handle that, if you can see, is quite pliable. It also has a slanted edge. I love this one. It's a 2-inch. They have different sizes, different shapes. It feels great in my hand. So if you have arthritis, if you have cramping hands, things like that, or if you're painting a ton, Try this out. Go check out your local hardware store and just feel it and see if it feels like a good fit in your hand. It does fit really well in my hand. The bristles on this are not the softest. They start out very soft, but they tend to collect some texture over time. I've used this a million times. You can see from the base of it. It's pretty grungy. It still works really well, and I love this for blending if I'm blending on flat surfaces. So if I am doing a dresser top and I want to blend and have it very seamless, this is awesome for it. I also whip these out if I need to blend like 5 different colors, because let's be honest, you don't always have the money to buy 5 different ClingOns to blend all your work. So if you have your nicer brush to lay everything on and do the final, but you need extra brushes in between to do all the different colors. You should have, if you're blending, you should usually have a different brush for each color to work with. So the Wooster Stubby Brush, because they're a really economical choice and they work pretty well. I do feel like I need to replace these about once a year, once every 2 years, because they get a little sticky, they get a little stiff, they're not quite as awesome anymore, but you can dampen them up and they work really well. So that's another cheap option for you. And then we're gonna move on to the YSL brushes. So these are fairly new. We got them in the last year. I retail these as well, they're on my website. These are basically a step below a ClingOn. So these are manufactured by YSL. They have a tea candle. They feel really nice. They're very, very light. So they're easy to use. They have beautiful bristles. The bristles are used with an epoxy that is a cement epoxy. So you will not have shedding on this. When you first get it, you might want to kind of dust it off. If there's any that weren't attached, they'll come right out. You don't need to wash this 30 times to get the bristles out like you do with some fancy brushes. It's pretty much locked in there. It holds a decent amount of paint. It's a synthetic brush. It is not quite as amazing as a ClingOn, but it's actually pretty darn close. There's a couple different sizes. We've got ovals, rounds, flats. I will be honest, I use the rounds for salve all the time. A lot of people love them for blending and things like that, but I tend to use them for salve. You could also use them for wax as well. Salve is an alternative for wax, like this big one. So we've got the 2-inch palm brush. Right now this smells amazing because it's covered in salve. I never wash these. I just let them soak in salve and they're beautiful. So this is a 2-inch palm. It's got a tea candle as well. It's a little heavier. You hold it in like the center of your palm. This is awesome for signs. This is awesome for dresser tops. Honestly, dusting your kitchen counters, things like that. This is just amazing. It holds a ton of salve. It will never lose bristles. You can see I'm pretty rough with my brushes, so I don't know if you guys can see. See, the bristles are kind of sticking out, but they're not coming off. If you were doing something with paint with this and you are abusive to your brushes, you can always just cut those little bristles off. There's so many bristles, you're not gonna miss them. If you cut off 3 or 4, you'll be fine. I also use a really expensive ClingOn brush for salve. This actually started as a moment of desperation. I was in my store doing salve demos and realized I forgot a salve brush. And I happened to have a ClingOn S35 or 37, no, S50, sorry, in my painting bag that I had with me. So I grabbed my S50 and I used it for salve. And once you use it for salve, you can't go back. You're never gonna get the wax and oils out of it. So this is my most expensive salve brush. But after I started using it, I was like, I love it for salve. It's incredible. It works really, really well. So this has actually become my go-to salve brush, which is silly. I go back and forth between these, and I also have a 1.5 inch round with a longer handle. That's a YSL brush. And those are my 3 main salve brushes, but I have like 10. I won't lie to you. So now to ClingOns. This is where people get a little confused, and it's so simple. So ClingOn brushes come in 3 shapes. This is your basics, okay? You have a round, and you can see one, it's gonna have an R on it. So round, R for round. They make this very, very simple. It also has a round base to the brush, and the bristles are in a round shape. You've also got an oval. Guess what? They start with an O. They're making this as easy as possible. It's gonna have an oval base to it, and the bristles are shaped like an oval. And then, I know you know this is coming, you've got a flat. It starts with an F, flat base. It's a square-shaped rectangular base and a rectangular-shaped bristles. Now, when do you use each of these? Why do you use different shapes? What projects need different shapes? It's really, really simple. So I want you to keep this in mind. The shape dictates the shape. So if you are using paint to paint your banisters in your stairwell and they're round, if you are painting spindles on dining room sets, and they're round. If you're painting anything that's got curves to it, if you're painting anything with crevices where it's rounded edges, you want to use a round brush. Round surfaces, use a round brush. It's really, really easy. The size, you just go based on what you're working with. If you're doing something that's got really teeny little spindles, you're going to want to use a really teeny little round. So like you're going to grab the R14. This is super small. It's just going to get in all the crevices. If you're doing something bigger, the R20, this is going to get bigger round surfaces. So if you've got just a curvy dresser, curvy mannequins, this is your go-to brush. Round surfaces, round brush. Flat. When do you use a flat brush? On flat surfaces. So if you're doing a dresser, big flat top, or if you're doing a coffee table and it's got flat drawer fronts, if it's got flat square shaped legs, anything square, anything flat, you're going to use a flat brush. Flat to flat. Again, size dictates it. So if you're doing something like a small little end table and you've just got a small little surface, or you want to do some blending on the top of the table and you want smaller detailed areas, you go with a smaller flat, or you can go all the way up to the big. This is an F50. This is the Big Daddy. I actually use this F50 more than anything else probably. It's in my top 3, but I use it almost daily. So flat surfaces, flat brush. So we know round surfaces for round brushes, flat surfaces for flat brushes. When do you use an oval? On oval shaped surfaces? No. I mean, you're good. I don't have a lot of oval shaped surfaces in my house, but an oval is the best of both worlds. It's a combination of a round brush and a flat brush. So you're going to be able to hug all the curves like you would with a round. You're going to be able to carry as much paint as you would with a flat. You're going to get super great coverage. So you can do the dresser top with this, but also the spindles. If you are going to just have one brush in your arsenal and you're like, I have enough money to buy one Klingon brush, what's the one to get? Pick an oval, because it's going to do everything. Once you get an oval in your arsenal, you get comfortable with that, and you want to start expanding, then you can start getting the detailed brushes. So then you get the flats, you get the rounds, you get stubby handles, you get everything else. The stubby handles. So there are 2 options for this. There's an S30 and an S50. They have a short handle. That's why we call them stubbies. I don't think that's a technical term. We just kind of name them that. They are ovals. So you can see from the base, it's an oval shape. It's got an oval shaped bristle base. It is super awesome. It holds a ton of paint. I actually did an entire kitchen with an S30, which is kind of insane because this is a small brush, but it holds a ton of paint. It's not a bad brush. I love that one. They feel really good in your hand, and the reason they made these are because people were poking themselves in the eyes with the long ones. So Klingon brushes are perfectly dynamic. So when you hold a brush, a Klingon, you're going to hold it like a pen or a pencil. You hold it essentially at the base where your bristles are hanging in there. So because of that, there's not a lot of bristles weighing this part down, but there's a lot of weight in here. You need to balance that. So they give you a really long handle, and it's weighted perfectly so that it perfectly balances. It's gonna sit well in your hand. It's not gonna cause, arthritis flare-ups for the most part. It's really easy to use. But people stab themselves in the nose. They hit themselves in the eyes with it. I have poked myself quite a few times with these. You have to be careful. People were starting to cut the handles off. Every once in a while, you'd see somebody that sawed off the end of the handle. Klingon saw that. They came out with the stubby brush. So this one, if you're prone to stabbing yourself in the face with a big one, go with a stubby. Grab either one of these. They're oval, so they're going to do just about every surface you could imagine. They are super easy to hold. They weigh a little bit less than the bigger brushes, but honestly not much. I feel that the handle is actually a little heavier. The bristle edge is not, but they're just easy to hang on to. They feel good in your hand, and they hold a ton of paint. So that is a big deal. There's also bended brushes they're the P series. There's, I believe, 4 of them, and I don't have any sitting here right now. They're all in my stores, but they are the long-handled brushes. They go up this way, and then they curve, or they turn at an angle. So those are amazing for, I don't think I have any sitting here. I don't. Those are perfect for china hutches, where you're reaching in and you need to get around the corner of something. Or if you're doing the underside of a table, if you're doing something where you basically are at a weird angle and you're trying to turn your hand and you can't quite get your brush in there, get a P-series brush. They're gonna reach all those little crevices a lot easier. They are smaller bristles, so they're not gonna be as thick as this. Even the largest one does not have this many brushes. They're not meant to hold a ton of paint and paint an entire surface. They're meant for details, inside, underneath, behind. They are just meant to make your life easier. So there are those, and then there are also the block brushes. These are your big daddy brushes. I also don't have any of these. They're both at my stores. There's the B10 and the B12. They're 5 inches and 6 inches, I believe, long. They are huge, big block brushes. The handle can screw off of them, so you can just hold it by the base. But they're awesome for doing varnish on a dresser top or coffee tables, dining room tables, cabinets, things like that, where you want to just have 3 strokes and you are done. It makes your life super easy. It holds a ton of paint, and you don't have a ton of brush strokes because you're not going back and forth a bunch of times. You've just got that big block brush. So those are my absolute faves in terms of Klingon. Everything you need to know about them. This little guy I use every single day. His little itty bitty brother, the S30, I use every single day. The F50 I use every single day, and I have an 040 that I use on a regular basis. Now the 040, if I were to say you're new to Klingon and you're going to try one brush, it would either be the 040 or the S30. They're oval shaped. They'll do every surface you need. They're medium sized. They hold a ton of paint. They're just good all around brushes. So if you were going to spend money on one brush, make it one of these. Then you can get it crazy and start buying all the other fancy brushes, and you become obsessed like I am and have too many brushes. So once you've got your Klingon, what do you do with it? How do you take care of it? How do you use it? Super simple, okay? You should be using these. If you're using chalk style paint, you should be using these damp. So I want you to get your brand new brush and I want you to soak it in water. I am kind of old school. I take this clamp, super simple, super fancy, and I just levitate it into the water. So I put my clamp on the edge, and this just sits in the water like this. And when I have it up on my desk, it just sits evenly. You can also hang strings on your wall and have your, put the string or put hooks through here, whatever it is, but you want to basically have your water line not touch the filaments or the strings above the filaments of your brush. So you want it to go about to here. 2/3 of the way up the brush is perfect. It's going to absorb a lot of water, but you want to do this for about an hour before you ever use your Klingon. And this is, like I said, for chalk style paint. I'll talk about that a little further because there's other rules for different kinds of paint. So you're going to just kind of let the ends soak in the water. It's going to soak up a little bit of the water. It's going to moisturize your brush. It's going to hydrate it, and it's going to make your paint go on super, super smooth. Between the self-leveling effects of most chalk style paints, I use Wisol all the time. It self-levels like a dream. Between that and the self-leveling of a damp Klingon brush, you're not going to have any brush strokes. You put it on there, you let it dry, it looks flawless, and you look like a pro no matter what. So get your brush damp before you use it. Then, while you're using it, if at any point you feel like your paint is starting to drag, you're feeling, some sort of resistance as you're brushing. You'll notice when you first go in there with that damp brush, it's gonna glide on like crazy. It's so easy. And then halfway through your project, you're like, it's starting to pool. You can feel like a little roughness there. Take a squirt bottle, squirt your brush, or dip your brush in your water again. Get it damp just a tiny little bit. You don't need it dripping, soaking wet, nothing like that. Just get it a little damp, and your paint's gonna glide on like crazy. So make sure that you keep this damp throughout the project. If you need to walk away for an hour, you've got 2 options. You can take a brush and throw it inside of a Ziploc bag. You put it in some cling wrap, wrap it up so that it's airtight and your paint is on there. If you're gonna do that, I recommend dipping it in your paint first, kind of coating it, load it up with paint, and then wrap it up. It'll stay for days. If you put it in a Ziploc bag and really close it, you're gonna have this good to go for days. 2 days later, you can take it out. A lot of people love to take that bagged brush and throw it in the refrigerator. It lasts even longer. I don't even think it's necessary. I leave them out in my garage in the heat, and they're totally fine for a few days, even with enamel. So you're pretty good on that as long as there's no airflow. Another thing you can do is just pop it back in your jar. So you need to run and go pick up your kiddo from school, throw it in your jar, let it soak a little bit while you're out and about. Come back, even if it's 2 days later, you're totally fine. You just don't want your brush laying on the bottom of your jar. You don't want to put pressure on it because it's gonna bend the bristles. They'll eventually come back, but it's not so great for your brush. So hang it in there and let it just kind of soak. And then when you're done using it and you're totally finished with your project, it's time to clean, you do the same thing. You throw it in your jar. You don't have to wash it, just throw it in there. Within about 30 seconds, you'll see the bristles open up. Paint will literally start to fall out, and it's cleaning itself. Could not be easier. If you're using a ton of paint, like you dunk it in there and there's a ton of paint on it, you might need to come back in an hour. When the color of the water is super saturated, toss it out, put clean water in, let it do it again. If you're using, you know, Prussian blue or something that's got so much pigment in it, do that 3 or 4 times. You might want to run it under some water if you need to, if you're not as lazy as me. But for the most part, it's going to clean itself. Every once in a while I have paint on there that I just can't get off, or I need to jump from one color to another immediately. I need to wash my brush. Take this, put it under running water in my kitchen sink. I just let the water come down right on top of it. All the paint starts to pour out. I do that for a minute or so. Decently warm water. You don't need anything scorching hot. Once it's all cleaned out for the most part, I flip it over. I just kind of in my hand. I might, if it's enamel or something else, varnish, and it's something I really don't want drying in there, I'll grab a little Blue Dawn dish soap and clean it with that. You won't need to use paint strippers. You won't need to use, you know, turpentine or anything crazy. As long as you're using decent products on it to paint with, it'll come right out of your paintbrush. So nothing to worry about there. It's super, super easy. When you're finished cleaning, you've got 2 options. If you know you only do one project every few months and you're not going to be using this brush for the next 6 weeks or something, just go ahead and hang it to dry. So hang it up on your wall or hang it up over your counters, whatever it is, let it fully dry. Once it's dry, you put it in your cupboard, in your drawer, you're good to go. If you're going to be using it tomorrow, next week, something like that, leave it in the water. Let it soak. Just don't let it sit on the surface of the glass or jar, whatever you're using, but just, you know, keep the water level to right here. Let it sit. It'll be fine for another week, 2 weeks, whatever, and your brush is ready to go for the next time. That actually is going to extend the life of your brush. If you are to keep it in the water and you use it on a regular basis, that brush is going to last you forever. I have brushes that I've been using a couple of years now. The handles have no paint on them. They are destroyed and the bristles look brand new. I have never had a bristle fall out of my ClingOns. I did have one student have one come out of an S50 when they first started making them. That's the only bristle I've lost so far. So that says a lot. They're all cemented in with cement epoxy. These bristles are not coming out. They are hardcore. And on top of that, these are all handmade. They're made in the Netherlands. Frank, the owner of ClingOn, is incredible. He's a good human being, and he takes the time to make sure they are sourcing the best materials they can. They're synthetic bristles. They're just an all-around good company. They employ adults with disabilities to build these brushes for them, put them out in the workforce. It's just an incredible all-around great company. One more thing that I forgot to mention. So we talked about the strings. You'll notice that there are strings on the ovals, there are strings on the rounds, but there are not strings on the flats. And this is to keep their shape. So when you get your oval or your round brush, do not take the strings off. Those serve a very big purpose. They're going to keep your brush in nice, perfect shape for the long haul. If you take those off, your brush will tend to kind of spray outward. All the bristles will go out. You'll have kind of a funky little brush. They don't do it on the flats because the base of the flats holds it all in. It doesn't need it. So if you get them, leave this on. Do not worry if you're getting paint on it. Mine are beautifully blue and purple. They soak up a lot of the color. They're originally gray, you can see on this one. So they're just there for a purpose. So don't take them off. This one you can actually see I've used so long that it's gonna start ripping. So I might need to replace this one at some point, or I'm just gonna super glue that on there because I don't want it to fall off. So leave those on, take good care of your brushes, treat them nicely and they will treat you nicely. And don't always think that you have to spend $1 million on brushes. If you're just getting into furniture painting, you don't need to go spend $200 on ClingOn brushes today. You should get an S50. It's gonna make your life easier. Grab an 040. It's gonna make your life easier. But then head to your hardware store, grab some smaller brushes that you can kind of learn with. You can destroy a little bit and you're not gonna cry. Go pick up some makeup brushes, go pick up, you know, a nice little fan brush from Amazon. All of these are just under $10 and they're gonna get you pretty far. If you are a waxer and you wax your furniture, make sure that your brush for wax stays a wax brush. You cannot go back and forth. If you've used it for wax, you cannot use it for paint. Wax repels paint. So make sure that you keep this separate. If you're using it for salve, it's very easy to know which one is your salve brush. I have 2 ClingOn S50s right here. Obviously this one's in plastic, so it's very clear to know which one is which, but I have plenty of S50s, and if I mix them up and I'm like, I don't know which one is my paintbrush, all you have to do is smell it. It smells amazing it's your salve brush. If it smells like nothing, it's your paintbrush. So keep those separate and they will treat you really, really well. If you have any other questions, let me know. If you have a great brush that you are just madly in love with that I haven't mentioned today and I need to test it out, let me know. I've tried some other brushes. I have a big name brush that was my biggest investment when I first started furniture painting. Spent $50 on it, a natural bristle brush, and it never stopped shedding. It held a ton of paint, but oh man, 6 months later, it was going naked. So I was very hesitant to jump into ClingOns after that. I had been burned by a very fancy brush, and it took a lot for me to spend that money again. I know the feeling. I am not one to just drop money on things because people say so. I finally jumped in after everybody said they loved Klingon. I bought a flat. I believe my first one was an F40, and I fell in love. I mean, within the first swipe of paint, I knew I was never going back, and I have it. So let me know if there's another brush on the market that you just love that's so incredible and I should test it out, or I should try it, or I should add it to my arsenal. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you have a project and you're not sure which brush is best for that piece, send me pictures and I can help you out. I can walk you through the whole process. And if you need a brush, you want to take on a Klingon, or you want to grab one of the Wise Owl brushes, or you need a good salve brush, they're on thecopperrealm.com. I'll have a link below. And if you like this video and you want to subscribe, that would be awesome, because I'm just talking to myself over here. So if anybody wants to hang out, I would really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have an awesome day and have fun painting. I'll see you next time.